What is going on, everybody? Ramdean and Black with you here in downtown Toronto. It's been a while since we've really digested what's going on in the landscape of mixed martial arts. So before we get to some of the big fights that are happening in the future, I know everybody wants to talk about GSP and Michael Bisping. GSP can make history. Let's kind of talk about what happened this past weekend. His history was made in the UFC. Demetrius Johnson in the co-featured bout having a chance to face off against Ray Borg. They were supposed to face off in Edmonton. Borg had to back out, but they had the chance. And Demetrius Johnson shattering records. He's the man. He's the modern day Bruce Lee, 125 pounds. Coached by Matt Hume, whose dad trained with Bruce Lee. So the concepts are there. Hoists Ray Borg up. He's slamming him to the ground into that arm lock. Beautiful stuff from Demetrius Johnson at 216.
So if he just did that moment, we'd be like, oh my God. Like it'd be like a highlight reel moment.
Yeah.
When you see a crazy knockout or somebody flips their motorcycle 5 times, or there's like a football thing where a guy, that's a highlight. That's a moment. That's a crazy moment in time. To me, what's amazing about that is he could have done that or done any of 12 or 13 other stunt finishes that he's probably got, because he crushed this young man, beat him up, beat him physically so his body is sore, beat him psychologically so he doesn't even know what to do next, and he couldn't breathe. He's trying to demand that his body respond in ways that he can defend himself, and he can't. So that was the 4th round, I believe?
Yeah.
So
was that
the 4th round?
Fifth round, yeah.
Again, right?
Yeah.
Again, right. I question that because the first one, when I went to watch it the second time, we watched it at my house. Mark was there. It didn't tape the first one, so I had to join it from the second. Which was interesting in its own right. Watch a fight backwards, or watch a fight and skip around, or watch only 1 and 3 and try to figure out.
You get confused if you do that.
Try to figure out what happened, why they're like that. And by round 2, it's like, this guy's moving slower. Of course he is. His hips are sore. His back is sore. It's hard to breathe. That's what Demetrius did to him for 22 minutes. And after that, he could do anything he wanted.
And that's the special thing about Demetrius Johnson is, he's so uber focused because he has good coaching. He has motivation. He has his family. For whatever reason, he wants to stay a champion. He's broken records, and he continues to do things that amaze both the casual and hardcore fans and his peers. Is this the way that he's going to be able to garner attention, by doing stuff like this? Yeah,
and I think he gets that now.
Yeah.
Like, I think so his loss to Brad Pickett. If you go back and watch that.
Can you believe that? He lost.
Brad Pickett out-wrestled him.
Yeah, we love Brad Pickett. But the fact that Demetrius Johnson, of all the fighters that he could have lost to, losing to Brad Pickett, when you look at some of these other dynamic fighters that he's faced, it's just weird.
And he goes back and he says, when he fought Brad Pickett, he thought to himself, that's it, I'm going to go. I think they might have made $65,000 for Fight of the Night bonuses at the time, but eventually it became 50. It's just really weird. Inflation usually goes the other way. So he's like, I want to make bonuses. And he lost the fight. And he said, that's the last time he ever did it. So then he started to fight smart, risk-reward analysis. Everything was feeding to something else that worked. And now he's realizing the total dismantling of somebody. George did that. Others have done that, but he can do it in such a way that whether it's at 12 minutes or 17 minutes or 22 minutes, you'll be so physically dismantled that he can do these kinds of things. Finish at the 1 second, or throw you up in the air and armbar you, take you apart so badly that if Demetrius Johnson grappled with you or I, he could do that right away.
Yeah.
Against these guys who are the top of the top, he has to
bust them
up until they're shitty like us.
Yeah,
until they're regular people or below, and then he can do that to them. So he's going to keep doing that.
What's shocking about it is that Ray Borg was in tip-top form. He came to fight. He came to become the UFC 125-pound champion. And you saw him still trying to out-grapple Demetrius Johnson, still getting takedowns. It's just he doesn't have the experience of being inside of that cage at that level for as long as Demetrius Johnson has.
Yeah, and if they said, okay, you don't have the experience at that level, but you have the heart and the desire to win and the guts, and you're in the best shape of your life, go fucking get him for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a 10-minute fight.
Yeah.
That's different. This is a 25-minute fight where Demetrius Johnson, I mean, there's other things about the fight that blow my mind. I watched it back on Periscope with friends on Periscope, and there are one or two moments that Borg wills himself into something. Remember, he gets his back, and the audience freaks out. Oh my God, something happened.
Yeah.
Something other than total dominance is happening. There was another time he took Demetrius down. So he's on Demetrius's back. Demetrius, you see him thinking, okay, right. Of course, I'm not going to win every moment of the fight. I will lose.
To expect that, though,
and
from
then
him.
Just like perfect execution to get him off the way that he's rehearsed 1,000 times, because he doesn't just rehearse to win.
Yeah.
Then he gets taken down, and instead of accepting the takedown, both hooks go in, and he's elevating him. He's not accepting it, and he's doing it in different ways. We'll talk about Tony and Kevin Lee. Demetrius went a totally different way. He didn't say, I'll lock you up and try to submit you. He said, I'll destabilize you. This is not considered a win of you beating me to this position, because this position is not over yet. You know what I mean? Shit like that. Like, we were watching it just going, oh, come on, this guy's so good.
That's super cool that you just brought up this concept of that we don't just rehearse to win, because I think when people think about game planning and strategy, and there's, we want to, and we've learned from some of the best in the world, Chris Weidman's philosophy, we win every single position. But what happens if you can't win every single position?
I spoke to Eddie Bravo yesterday, and one of the reasons you must have a offensive guard or a sweeping guard or a submitting guard or a guard you can elbow from is because even if you are of the belief that this position is for standing up, what if I can't stand up? Mm-hmm. And somebody takes me down. There's 4 minutes and 27 seconds left in the round. I try to stand up, I fail. I try to stand up, I fail. Now I'm weaker and I can't stand up. Do I just go, well, I tried, and just get shit kicked for 4 minutes? No, you have to understand that at the highest level. I mean, as much as people don't always want to give John Jones credit, John Jones in the fights with Cormier, including the second one, that we remember the head kick. Cormier had some fucking great moments. Great moments.
Really good moments.
And in the fight with Gustafsson, he lost rounds. He lost minutes of rounds he won. It's like, the best of the best understand that there are times where I'm pushing and times where you're winning. And you just turn those around. And I like that you brought up Weidman. And Weidman has talked about this. I've talked to him about this. When he was fucked up that spinning kick and Rockhold took him down. Rockhold dominated him in every single moment of the rest of it, other than Chris showing heart and toughness and covering up. And Chris is like, I should be able to lose an exchange or a position and not have the wheels come off and just get it back. Chris now will and does and did against Calvin. And Calvin fucking smoked him. Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah, that was a hell of a
dug
fight.
in. And Chris was like, sometimes you get smoked. And so even DJ, it's a weird psychological thing. If you, let's say you're Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
And everywhere you go, everybody lets you have everything. You want 3 supermodels? Well, we're 3 supermodels. We'd like to have sex with you. You want tiramisu? Yeah, here's all the tiramisu. You want to go through the door? Everything you get.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, well, wait a second, hold on, Justin. You'll fucking throw a temper tantrum. Not because he's an asshole, but because by the time your new norm has become constant yes, no freaks you out. And Demetrius could easily fall into that. He hasn't and he won't now, but a person like him could. You're dominant for so long. It's why one of the reasons George lost to Matt Serra.
You think, if you look at, Demetrius Johnson's life, though, and you just see how he lives things, some of the embedded stuff. This is a man that's, he's an athlete, and especially in the world of combat sports, he is recognized as the highest pinnacle. There's very few people that have eclipsed Demetrius Johnson in this certain area.
In almost any sport.
Sure. Exactly. No, it's hard to quantify because they're two different things. But
and at different stages
exactly.
of
development. But if, for example, if you look at football, the NFL, and if you were to have all the managers and all the coaches and all the peers say, give us the top 3 best players. I don't know, it's subjective because, everybody has a different roles. But I'm sure you're going to have some of the same players. That means everybody in the sport recognizes that these people are the best. In mixed martial arts, if you talk to trainers, talk to fighters, talk to coaches, managers, all that stuff, most likely Demetrius Johnson is in the top 3.
Yeah.
But if you look at the embedded stuff, this is a guy that's still doing his own dishes.
Yeah.
He doesn't live in a massive house. He's doing the things that he wants to do, and I think that's super refreshing. And I think that will allow him to remain the champion for so many years.
Yeah, I agree.
He's grounded.
I agree. And the people who do later become super rich or famous or influential, who have been normal, have a better chance of dealing with it. The Rock is one of the most famous, powerful, richest, most influential people in the world, but he didn't get it overnight. He wasn't born. He became a guy and then built it, and all of a sudden you're okay. Demetrius Johnson, I believe, will be recognized that way. He is to a lot of people. And even the conversation, it took way too long to even be able to do that. And they'll fucking forget 12 weeks from now about that armbar off the takedown. They'll forget about the last minute thing. I hope not too, but he'll have to keep doing that because that's the nature of people today. Because, sad to admit it, but a brilliant moment in a fight will be overshadowed by a brilliant tweet, you know? And that is sad. Demetrius, I've seen DJ say this. I don't curse and I'm not rude and I don't cheat on my wife and I don't take drugs. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know?
I just kick people's asses.
Yeah, it's better than anyone.
And as fight fans, that's what we want to see. We want to see, to me, the idea of growth. Because I think we're running out of worthy challengers. And I know DJ wants to stay at 125 pounds. A lot of people are saying, go to 35. Those are super fights are there. He's like, I'm going to just kick everybody's ass here.
Yeah, let's wrap up DJ in a bit, and then we'll start a separate one, and later on this afternoon we'll put out another championship rounds of talking about Tony and stuff. But it's one thing we watch and we're like, this guy, Conor has to fight Tony. Habib has to fight this guy. DJ, he's running from this guy. I haven't heard. They're human beings, and they should do whatever the fuck they want. And if they're bothered by an audience, they can choose to say, I will make this statement because everybody says I'm scared or everybody says I should do this or that'll get me paid. But by no means do they have to listen to any of this stuff. And I know that's frustrating for us. If we make a show and this guy needs to fight this guy. No, he doesn't. Not at all. And if you get mad and you start a thing on Instagram and say, it's time, Habib has to stop, Conor has to fight Tony. These guys are free human beings. You're making
Tony Ferguson really mad right now because he's like, no, Conor has to fight me.
Sadly, he doesn't.
He doesn't.
I think he should.
Yeah, we all do.
We all do. But he doesn't give a fuck what we think. Right. He's worth $80 million. He's got a child that he loves. He's got a million businesses. If either it bothers him personally, which I doubt it does, or he thinks it will be negatively affect his business. You want to compel a fighter or a musician or a politician to do something, find a way to have them not doing it negatively affect their business or their brand.
Oh, then they'll change.
And some of them will do it right away. So that's our mission. Yeah. If you want to compel these guys to do it, tweeting is not going to do it, but finding a way to undermine their own actual desire for success, if it matters to you enough, that will compel them to do it. So
are we going to continue to talk about things that are going on right now, or are we going to save that for a different chat? Are we going to talk
Fuck it, let's keep talking.
Let's keep talking.
Yeah, this is we do whatever we want. We don't have a boss.
So I love Demetrius Johnson. That's why I wanted to talk about him at the top of the show, because to me he's just so spectacular. It's just his mind and body and everything's experience from the WEC, working with Matt Hume, the UFC, 135 pounds, 125 pounds. He's kind of seen it all. So, and just the fact that he's getting better, and it's a perfect combination of his IQ, his mental strength, and the physical being, all in combination, all working together, and you see some of the things that he's capable of. And do we see this version in every weight class? Do we have Demetrius Johnson? I know it's hard to compare, but we think of 155 pounds, we think of Conor because he's dominant. They both suffered losses in the past, so there are certainly parallels. They're dominant. But what makes Demetrius Johnson different than, say, John Jones?
I think his nervous system. I think he's actually physically different. I think his brain is different. Like, we underestimate and underappreciate in our favorite athletes or our favorite anything we watch and ourselves, how much we can train our brain. Neuroplasticity is real. It lasts your whole life. You have the ability to make your brain different. And he's done that, I think, on a different level than a lot of people. And I think he's done it with Matt. I think Matt Hume and Greg Jackson, there are others, but these guys who are just a little bit more obsessed with figuring out sort of the matrix of the game. So Greg, for many years, literally made game trees of every single fighter. Yep. So what Demetrius is doing, whether or not there is a game tree that's drawn up or laid out, I don't know, I suspect no. But with Greg, he would sit down with the fighters, and over time, John Jones, if he puts his hand here, that is represented as a circle, John's hand on your shoulder. Your reaction is to go inside, it moves to a new circle. Right. From there, he goes to the underhook or he goes to the leg. Your response on either of that, and you have a giant game tree of options.
Are those all high percentage things?
They're all his best choices based on it. That is what Demetrius does. I don't know that he draws it up. When I talked to him in Las Vegas, he said that he literally, and his words, he runs simulations. Mm-hmm. He didn't say, I walk through the fight or I rehearse it or I visualize it. He said, I run simulations of the fight. And then I asked him about Conor versus Mayweather, and he said, absolutely, Conor has a chance to win. He said, I've run the simulation. He didn't, you know what I mean? He's not saying, I fucking wrote it out or I looked at their attributes or I made comparisons. He runs the simulation. Conor lost that fight. You go to Demetrius, he's like, well, he can win that fight because he's not obsessed with just the result. Mm-hmm. He's looking at the potential choices and where they lead. So if you go back and we sit down with Demetrius, and we use that as an example because that's the example he gave me, he will explain to you where Conor could have won and the choices that either he made wrong or where Mayweather made the correct choices to stop him. That's what his brain is doing during the fight without thinking. And there are lots of little examples of it. I've broken down 10 or 12 of them in the 3 or 4 breakdowns I've done of him. But one of my very favorites is as he goes to the inside of the arm on the Olympic gold medalist, Cejudo. And Cejudo's 2 reactions. One is to swell it up. And as he does, he exposes his liver and Demetrius fucking drills him in it. Or the other is he moves to this and Demetrius goes to his back. And the other simplest example, you'll see this all the time now that I mention it, you'll look for it. Demetrius pushes the guy like this. And you either move away, and if you move away, he strikes you or has many other options, or you move back towards him, and then he locks you up. Very simple, but it illustrates exactly what's going on. He gives you a reaction, and there are 3 reactions possible. Move away, move forward or nothing. Exactly. Yeah. Now, once you under the next level, and Demetrius do it, you do that to him, you push against him, the 3 options are back, forward or nothing. No, his option is something else.
I'm just going to hit you right away.
He has started to run the simulations of these are the normal, predictable reactions, so I will train myself to behave differently. That's fucked up, but that's what's happening.
It seems to be a different philosophy when training Demetrius Johnson and Eddie Bravo's his philosophy or his methods in helping Tony Ferguson become the UFC interim 155-pound champion. It seems that Eddie Bravo's like, okay, we have a fighter with a specific body type who's good in this areas. Let's make him dangerous based on his length and his wrestling background and his toughness and so on and so forth.
I think those 2 things can work together and do work together. And I think they're connected. So if we separate them for a moment, Matt Hume versus Eddie Bravo, Matt Hume says we'll master everything. Eddie Bravo says we'll master everything, but we'll also discover physiological advantages that you have, and we'll even spend more time on those. So Tony Ferguson, much like Ben Saunders, who was on our Periscope earlier. What up, Ben Saunders? We love you. They have a particular body type that happens to lend itself very, very well to
triangle chokes.
Yeah, triangle chokes, omoplatas, arm bars, darces. And so they play them. But also, and I talked about this yesterday, it's also on the YouTube channel, the Study of Martial Arts #5. I spoke with Eddie for 20 minutes before. And he explained in detail the reality is that there are times, there were two possible situations here where this makes sense. One is Tony or any of his fighters can't stand up, like we were talking about earlier. You can't stand up. I want to stand up. I got taken down. It's dangerous for me to be on my back. I want to get up. Holy fuck, he's better at not letting me get up than I am at getting up. What do? Just sit here and lose? Yeah. So there's that scenario. The other one is the one that they were dealing with, which is Tony, when the two men were on one or both feet, fighting, grappling, striking, whatever they were doing, Tony was winning that scenario. So Kevin wanted to take him off his feet and force him to fight in a ground scenario because Tony was winning there. In that situation, Kevin wants to keep him there. Kevin doesn't want to back out. And because Kevin's trying to keep him there, that allows Tony to put his hands on his hips. So if you're on top of me and you want to get away, I better close the guard. If you want to stay there, I'll go to your hips. Once I go to your hips, we have an entire new flow chart of options with which I can beat you up, not the least of which is push you away with my knees and start fucking drilling you in the head. Those elbows, and Ben Saunders, same exact thing. Those, we have seen, and you see other guys, and we're 12-6. If a guy's here, 12-6 illegal. There's 12, there's 6. On my back.
It's not, it's the same thing.
Oddly, it's not
exactly
illegal.
The same thing. Yeah. That to me just blows my mind. It really is the exact same thing. But you're just in a different position.
Even stronger because I'm attached to you and I'm using you as leverage.
As an anchor.
Yeah. But you should be allowed to do it in both cases. But so then, those elbows, now we're seeing guys do that, but start attacking the collarbone. You're going to see within the next 3 or 4 months, somebody's breaking a collarbone from that position. 3 or 4 months, mark my words.
Would, and coulda, shoulda, woulda, would the Patrick Cote approach when he fought Ben Saunders, do you think that would have worked for Kevin Lee in this fight?
It's a really good point. And yesterday, when we were talking about it, I was talking about Khabib versus Tony. And I want to see Tony fight Conor.
I want to see them fight all of them.
Yes, exactly. We want to see them fight all. I want to see Conor fight Khabib too.
I want to do it all.
But so in that situation, Khabib is almost never in guard, right? So this guard doesn't work. So what do you do if you're, and I know that Eddie has twister side control. Eddie plays a half guard game. Eddie plays a lockdown game. Eddie, had a draw with Hoyler in the second fight, didn't finish it, but dominated him. All half guard. So their half guard game, if Eddie could dominate Hoyler Gracie from a half guard, then Ben Saunders or Tony Ferguson have the ability to dominate others from a half guard. But your example, and I thought of that this morning actually when I was thinking about it further, Pat Cote, our boy, we were talking to him and before that fight with Ben Saunders, and he's like, Ben Saunders is really, really dangerous from guard. And we said, what are you going to do? And what did he say?
He said, not let him have that position.
He said, what's his coach's name?
Fabio Holanda.
Fabio Holanda. So he said, as Fabio likes to say, half guard kills all, right? But that's not an absolute. Because I'm pretty sure Hoyler said half guard kills all too. So there's always an answer. It becomes an arms race. We've fucking forgotten about really fighting off our backs or dismissed it in MMA. And I talked about this yesterday. If you took, they've said it to us for the last 5 years, the guard is dead, right?
Yeah, they have.
And I mean, they've been saying it to us everywhere we go.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to be critical. We're just not interested in, the conversations that's out there about this Twitter beef or those pay-per-view numbers. It doesn't interest us. What interests us is the reality, the truth of what's happening. And the best of the fighters and their trainers and the people around them have all been, not all, that's wrong. 80 to 90% have been saying, the guard is dead, the guard is dead. We use the guard to heist our hips to stand up. We use the guard to heist our hips to stand up. It's too dangerous there. It's too dangerous there. And because 80 or 90% of the global fighting world believed that, their belief system.
There's a small chunk of people.
Yeah, they trained like that was true. Well, Eddie, Ben, Tony, and a bunch of others, Dana's saying Tony McGregor's next. Doesn't that ensure the fight doesn't happen? We got what you're saying. The promoter speak is a different game. It's a different language. Yeah. But these guys believe that it isn't. They're like, I hope these guys stop believing that the guard is dangerous. And then when they get in our guard, fuck these motherfuckers up.
The thing is, I understand that is a global, across the board thing. I think there's a couple of reasons. A, if because we've seen, history says, you take a fighter down to the ground, you control on top, the boo birds come.
Yeah.
There's a good chance that I'm not going to get a bonus if the fight ends up here. Let's do what Chuck Liddell has done and knock people out and make money that way.
You are 100% correct. If it was just about truth and just about the truth of the martial arts and just about winning, the martial arts would look a certain way. But bonuses, audience, Instagram followers, influence,
sponsorship,
shots at a title, sponsorship, all of those other things outside of the truth influence you. But as soon as everybody does anything, the other thing becomes scarce, and scarcity is value. And besides, you just got to figure it out. They thought George St-Pierre was boring. They still say he was boring. He sold more pay-per-views than all of them.
I'm going to tell you this fight with Michael Bisping and George St-Pierre going down in New York in November, there's no way this fight's going to be boring. These guys are going to kick the fucking shit out of each other. It's just the way that it is. George might try to wrestle him. He's going to realize Bisping's strong. Then he realizes I'm going to have to smash Bisping, and that's what we're going to get. It's going to be so much fun.
Did you see what the way that Bisping phrased the size? It's absolutely 100% right. It's like, that's the biggest George St-Pierre he's ever been.
Yeah.
Still the smallest guy I'm ever going to fight.
Yeah.
That's true.
Sure.
That is true.
Sure.
I'll tell you, we've known George for years. We've seen George more in the last 6 months than we've seen in the last 6 years. We've spent a 5-hour evening with him at fights. I followed him around and trained with him. We saw him with Kevin Lee training. We set him up with Kevin training. He's fucking huge.
He is huge.
He's huge. He's 200 plus pounds. George also, so it's very interesting because we are friends. And you and I are friends with George. We know him quite well. I text him and chat with him all the time. But I also understand that for the best of the best, it's all war. And everything is fair. So when we go out with George and we go out for lunch or a beer and we're not talking about fighting, we are friends. We're having a conversation. We'll talk about, the fucking paleontology or volcanoes or whatever. But when it comes time to be talking about combat, especially when there's a camera there, I understand that things he says to me, and this is true of them all, if they're fucking smart.
Misdirection.
Yeah. You can tell me the truth, but when that camera is there, that camera is potentially the audience, the promoter, your opponent.
Gonna get me hurt.
Exactly. All of it. So, you may be making statements based on what will make your audience make financial transactions regarding ticket sales and or t-shirts.
Of course.
You may be saying things that will make the promoter have a certain feel. You may say things that make Michael Bisping believe a certain thing. And he said this on camera, and it'll be my documentary that I've done with the documentary team at TSN is coming out in the next couple of weeks. And he said it on camera. I said, so George, what about misdirection? What about trying to get statements out into the ether that your opponent or the people around him know? And he looks at the camera and goes, some of that is happening right now. Mm-hmm. So even I see Mike continually kind of get this idea that George's main striking coach is Freddie Roach. George fucking loves Freddie Roach. He loves to train with him. For George, training is a gift. It's a pleasure.
Yep.
It's what he does in his life that gives him joy. Freddie is one of his heroes. When he touches pads with Freddie, he's like, somehow it's just better. Mm-hmm. And he loves Freddie. Freddie's going to be in his corner. But that motherfucker has been doing karate, Muay Thai, all of these other things. And when I'm sitting there with an Instagram, and on my Instagram you'll see George hitting pads with Freddie, I ask if it's okay. Yes, it's okay. I ask if it's okay on other things. It's not okay. Why? Because he wants you to see that. Mm-hmm. He wants you to see that, and he wants Bisping to imagine getting into a knuckle boxing match with him. Then you see footage of him big and powerful, and he wants Bisping to think he's going to wrestle me. Or does he want Bisping to think that he wants him to think? Do you know what I mean? All of this is happening. And which is also why, do you read even the ones that you, like, what have you enjoyed over the years? Sherdog or Junkie?
I try to read everything.
Yeah.
I try to read everything.
I literally try to read nothing now.
Yeah.
Because I know that most of it is not true.
Sure.
If I ask Kevin Lee, how does he feel after the weight cut? And he says, I feel fucking great. But that can be a lie. Then he says after he lost, no, I felt terrible.
Yeah.
That could be a lie. It's all there to influence the same way that politics and the same way that Fox or CNN or MSNBC, it's mostly nonsense.
Bullshit.
And you get drawn into a reality in which you think it's true. The truth is in the gym. The truth is in the fight. The truth is in the moments of the fight. That's where the truth is.
And the reality is this, because that's what I look at. I look at, there's certain things that, I've regurgitated things over the years. And one thing that sticks in my mind is, and I've referenced this, is Jens Pulver. I talked to Jens Pulver when he was fighting back in the UFC, and he said, there's days where you wake up a few days before the fight and you think to yourself, like the Wednesday before the fight, and you think to yourself, why the fuck can't be the fight? Why can't the fight be today? I feel like Superman. I could beat anybody on the planet today. Let's just hope Saturday morning I feel this same way. So we know that George is doing the things that he needs to do to fight Michael Bisping. He understands. He doesn't think that Michael Bisping's a shitty fighter, that he's past his prime. He understands he's dealing with the most evolved martial artist maybe in history. And when I say the most evolved, in such a small group of athletes ever. On top of that, Michael Bisping just brings certain things to the table that George has never had to deal with in real combat. He understands all of those things. Now, it's the idea of, misdirection is important, but he knows that Bisping's going to be able to see right through that 5 minutes into their contest.
Bisping has said that he thinks he knows exactly what George is. Now, I am not a truth detector.
That's a lie too.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm not a truth detector. Sounds fucking real. Bisping's like, fuck, I know what this guy is. He's a jab and a double leg takedown.
Yeah.
That sounds real, but why would he say it if it was real? It's more of a cocky, bombastic, and if that's so, George would be like, fuck, if he really thinks I'm that thing from 2013, he's fucked.
And Bisping doesn't
They
think that.
know all of this. All of this is a game. And we eat it up like fucking suckers. The lot of it. The lot of it. We hang on these bullshit statements that these guys make. Some to influence us, some in hopes of undermining your opponent. The very coolest and weirdest and grossest I've ever witnessed it was years ago. I went with the Score. I was with Forrest Griffin, and we went on a train, and a bunch of people who won a contest got to go. And
super fun.
Hang out. So yeah, it was Forrest. I sat with Forrest the whole time. It was brilliant. But there was about 8 World Series of Poker people, champions on the train nearby. Every fucking thing these guys said was bullshit. They would start telling a story of how they behaved at school in a conservative way in hopes that you would think of them as a conservative thinker. Or they would say the one time that they got mad at something and stressed. Like, all of it is there in hopes of making you think you know who they are. Because that could be powerful. But you know what's even more powerful? Is you think you do, but you're wrong. That's the game that George and Mike are playing.
And I think Bisping will approach this fight that I don't expect him to be that way. But if he is that way, I'm going to fucking smash that version of him. Yeah. But I've been in here with way too many top-level fighters to just assume that this is what I'm going to get. Now, again, sometimes he's right, sometimes he's wrong. He goes out there and says that shit about Luke Rockhold. He knocks Luke Rockhold out and becomes the UFC middleweight champion of the world. However, I just think that what we're going to get is 2 athletes that respect each other immensely and that are going to be so prepared to go in there and beat the shit out of each other. And that's exactly what we're going to see.
If I'm being really honest about it and I really am a fan of both these guys. I know I'm closer with George on a personal level, but I'm an immense fan of Mike's, and I really like him. But George has to prove something to himself in the first half of a round. Mm-hmm. So if you're Michael Bisping, you know that. But what do you do about it? Do you try harder? If you're Mike, do you try to harder? Do you try to stress him out? Do you think you can do you overwhelm him? Do you swarm him? Or do you just think, let's just not get drawn into changing anything. Let's go and beat Michael Bisping, the Michael Bisping that hasn't lost since Luke Rockhold beat him, that's got better and better, that fucking was knocked out cold pretty much against Anderson Silva and still came back and won the next round. That guy can beat George St-Pierre, so let's just be that guy. Let's not double and triple and quadruple guess our way into fucking something up where George takes us down on the first takedown. Let's go out and fight free. And that trick is the game that's happening in the minds of each of these guys every single time. Every single time. And when they're masters of it, you're like Matt Brown, fucking iron.
Yeah.
We asked Matt Brown about that, and he's like, there's no such thing. That's not a state. That's something I do to prepare to be as close to that as possible. I'm not definitively that. If I think I am, I'll just slack off, and all of a sudden I won't be that. So that's what Mike has to do. It can not, and George talked about it many times. We can neither overestimate nor underestimate our opponent.
Be prepared.
Just go in and fight.
Before we get to George St-Pierre and Michael Bisping in New York City, we have a couple of fight night cards. One in Poland, headlined by, I find this strange, Darren Till and Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Just because Cerrone's just such a huge star, and I know people believe, maybe the UFC thinks that Darren Till could be, and based on his fighting style, he's very offensive, very defensively deficient, and I just feel that if he goes into this fight with Donald Cerrone, Cerrone's going to chew him apart and take advantage of all those liabilities.
So Holly Holm, Conor McGregor, Stephen Thompson, a lot of these guys were masters of combat, who also realized that there was a deficiency and Tony Ferguson have become masters of combat, and also realized that a lot of people have a deficiency outside, where the distance between where I can just barely hit you and nothing can happen, how I manipulate from all the way out to just in range to hit you. That was, a lot of people were deficient in that. And smart guys, so say Calvin Gastelum, has been a killer who then added that. Darren Till feels like a guy relying heavily on that. He's like, hey, this is the key. This is the one thing. This is the winning formula. Distance management. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be a master of that. And that, at least in the performances we've seen, he has relied heavily on that. And being really good at one aspect of one sort of phase of one game against a genius of combat like Donald Cerrone, get you fucking knocked out. So he has to be more than that. He just hasn't shown it. He could be. We haven't seen a lot of that. We've seen him rely heavily on this concept. So he must have, when it comes in and that is taken away from him, he must show a lot more, and that's going to be asked of him, and maybe he has it. Maybe he doesn't.
Again, it's Donald Cerrone. And just when you look at the level of competition that Cerrone's faced and the level of competition, it doesn't mean that Darren Till can't win. We all know, we've seen it many times, but it just, when you've been in there with the killers that Cerrone's been in there with, it just feels like he's not going to be intimidated by you, and that he's going to break you. Like, he's going to force you to make so many errors, and then he's going to knock you there.
Yeah, maybe Mark can pull up his last few fights. But I'll tell you, the ones that jump out at us, and we've been in the room, we've been at the weigh-ins and been at the last interview after the weigh-in and the day of and stuff.
Him kicking the shit out of Patrick Cote. He's a former 205-pound guy who fought Anderson Silva for the 185-pound championship.
And he's a 55er. Yeah. But it's that one, McDessie, both happen to be Canadian, that's a coincidence.
The Lawler fight.
But it's these ones where he looks at it and he looks with just from what he sees as a factual reality, and he's like, oh, I'm way better than this guy. Miles Jury, there's another example. Right. So these are the ones where he looks at it and is like, oh.
That's what this is going to be. This is going to be a Miles Jury type fight.
And that's in those ones where it is not, he doesn't have to question, how could this go? What are some of the possibilities? What do I need to worry about?
He knows the possibilities.
When he looks in there and goes, are you fucking kidding me? There are times where there is somebody way better than another guy, and this is one of those times, and oh yeah, the better guy is me. When he has that swagger to him, fucking watch out.
Yeah.
Watch out. Those three examples and who else? Then he's got Jorge, where he knows Jorge is of his ilk.
Yeah. Exactly.
problem. Matt Brown, who took him to that limit,
Yeah.
but by the time he walks out for round 3, he's like, wait a second. Fuck, we got those 10 minutes out of the way. Now I can be better than this guy. I know I am.
Yeah.
There are Rick Story.
Yeah.
That one was that when he walked in with that knowledge, I didn't have that knowledge. Although when you think about it, Rick Story's greatest moments have been with will. Cowboy's greatest moments have been with skill. And so this is definitely, Darren Till can win it. There are many ways to win any fight, regardless of the challenge. But this is a hard one for sure.
And then another fight night card. This one going down in Brazil. A cool fight. The return of the Dragon, the former 205-pound champion, Lyoto Machida, who tested positive for steroids, was suspended.
Pills.
This is his first fight back. Taking on Derek Brunson.
He's 40.
He is 40.
Yeah.
He is 40 years old. However, we saw what a 40-year-old Floyd Mayweather did against a 28-year-old Conor McGregor. I know it's two different things, but
you know what? His punching and kicking compared to Derek Brunson may have that amount of lifetime further of experience
because he's been able to avoid taking big, massive shots because he played that karate type mixed martial arts game for many years.
And it goes back to something else we talked about earlier, like the audience boos or, you don't get your bonus or whatever. Lyoto just fucking danced around, made you miss, played games. Remember when your boy Ryan Bader finally closed his eyes and just
charged
I don't know what
after
to do. I guess I'm just going for it. We didn't boo Lyoto Machida because we could see it was something.
Some people did. If you remember when he first came out, there was a lot of decisions in there because he was playing that game. There was a bunch of boos, and then he got a bunch of finishes.
Yeah, right.
Kicked Randy Couture in the face. I think he was submitting guys on the ground, knocking out Ryan Bader.
Yeah.
He ended up getting beating Gegard Mousasi.
Yeah.
Pretty spectacular victories during his time in the UFC.
Did he beat Gegard or did Gegard beat him?
He beat Gegard by decision.
I remember Gegard
in his debut, right?
Who?
In Mousasi's debut?
No,
you mean?
never fought Mousasi.
I thought they fought.
No.
What fight was it? Who was Mousasi's first fight in the UFC?
Leo Latifi.
Oh yeah,
It was
that
Charles fight.
Jab City on the outside. Yeah, I know.
When we were in Detroit for that Uriah
so
Faber's
many fucking
combine,
fights.
What? I thought it was Machida.
Yeah, it was Gegard Mousasi sweeping somebody from the bottom.
Who was that?
I don't know.
What fight was
Gegard fight number 2 or 3 in the UFC.
What was his fight?
Shogun?
In the UFC?
No. Gegard fights 2 and 3 in the UFC after Latifi. Who did he fight?
Didn't he sweep Machida?
Yeah, I seem to recall. Yeah.
Oh, he did fight Machida.
He did. He swept Machida from the bottom. Yeah,
and when
because
was that?
I kept picturing it. That was fight number 2 or 3 in the UFC.
Oh, fight number 2. Okay, fight number 2.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's how much you can question reality. You saw the fight with your own eyes.
Yeah.
You experience, you remember that.
I did,
but then you're
I smoke a lot of pot.
Exactly. But there are so many fights. Reality is a malleable thing. We have to find the anchors of reality. But so
when Machida's able to, and hold on, Machida won?
Yeah.
Decision. One decision. So when you can go out and defeat a master of combat like Gegard Mousasi, and again, I've talked to a lot of high-level mixed martial artists. You know what they say? Gegard Mousasi is, there's very few people that are higher level than Gegard Mousasi. His ability to stay fucking calm, to murder you standing on the ground.
There's something I would recommend to anybody to do right now is forget about the end of the Mousasi and Weidman fight. Forget about the knee on the ground. Just turn it off when that happens and watch the rest of it. Holy fuck, that's amazing.
So good.
That was a fucking amazing fight. And shit happens. It's how it's interpreted and the choosing in your mind and stress and confusion and, referees and all of a sudden you got a doctor trying to get him to do a sobriety test in the fucking cage. It's all fucked up. But watch up until that knee. There are moments where Weidman's pushing back and where Mousasi has to bite down and just go, I'm going to punch my way through this. It's a fucking amazing amazing fight. Just get Fight Pass for that. There's probably a 30-day trial. You can watch that, and the best of you watch for 30 days.
Yeah,
If by then
exactly.
you're not hooked, then you're not gonna get hooked.
When you think about some of the other cool fights on that show that's in Brazil, like I said, Derek Brunson and Lyoto Machida. One cool fight for me is Colby Covington taking on Damian Maia. Covington, Tyron Woodley's boy, the guy that just beat
And Jorge's boy,
and
too.
Jorge's
They're
boy as well.
close.
So when you look at this, Colby Covington 12-1, Damian Maia's 25-7 or something like that. We know what Damian Maia brings to the table, but at this stage, he's never in easy fights. He's always in, unless he's smokes you. But for the most part, yes, his jiu-jitsu can keep him defensive. But he's always taking on tough guys as well. And I know there's always, the whole sport's filled with tough people. Is it Colby Covington's time? Does Damian Maia look, it's like, oh man, I thought for sure I was going to win the championship.
If Colby Covington lays out Damian Maia, I don't know. Damian, I think, is an intelligent guy with a lot of affiliates who loves jiu-jitsu, who's enjoyed the ride, who's made, hopefully, good money. If he gets beaten by this kid when he was that close, he will continue to fight if the joy of combat is there. Otherwise, we did it, and that's that. Colby Covington and Jorge worked together nonstop for the first of their teams, the Jorge fight with Damian. Damian got the back, Jorge battled him, and Damian said that guy came prepared.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yep.
He talked about the specifics of his preparation. So Damian was able to get the position, but nothing else, and unable to go further because of the threat. Jorge was talking about how much it fried his forearms. I had brunch with him the next day. And I'm looking at brunch with you, Jorge, again after you fight Stephen Thompson. Just so you know. Brunch 2. On me. Also,
Is there beer at brunch? Can you have beer?
Yeah, I had a Bloody Mary.
Yeah, that's right. You
I
had
had
Bloody
a Bloody
Mary.
Mary. Jorge, I don't think did. He's more of a weed smoker.
So did you ask for a Caesar and they didn't have a Caesar? So
They don't have Caesars in America, but
I thought they do now.
Some of them, northern states do. But I said to Jorge, "What do you smoke marijuana like for pain management?" It's like pain management, appetite management, stress management. That was more his speed. But they looked at that. They attacked that challenge as a team, and now they get round number 2 or round number, a redo as a team. And I think, Damian will have to even evolve, and he can further. But Mike Brown was telling me about Colby Covington, and we've seen him. We had seen him fight. We had seen him, be dominant. But Mike Brown was talking about how he is a standout in a room of standouts 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
So Dean Thomas, their whole room was talking about that. And even Jorge is like, those, and when you have two like that can push each other, two of the elite that are that close, and that's what you had in Cormier and Rockhold and Kane. That's what you have in Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington as well. And I'm sure there's others in that room. So I thought Jorge would come in capable of and ready to beat Damian Maia. Damian Maia credited him with being that close in a lot of ways.
Yeah, right.
And remember, he fucking had him hurt at the end of round 1 bad. If Colby gets that redo again, they'll get another chance to finish it. But you can't pick one or the other because Damian gets better all the time. And he learned too. It's like, okay, so this is what they do against my thing. Well, if this guy's going to approach it that way, I'll penalize him this way. So there's a lot happening in that fight. It's a great fight.
I quickly want to go through some of the divisions. Right now, we'll talk about one of the marquee divisions. I think the marquee division is probably 155 pounds or 145 pounds because those are Conor's divisions. But let's talk about what's happening at heavyweight. Stipe Miocic, the man right now at the top of the division. Looks like Alistair Overeem's going to be facing off against Francis Ngannou, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what's happening with Cain Velasquez. We don't know when he's coming back. What do you make of heavyweight right now?
It's a good question. We haven't seen a lot of the top. Like, Stipe hasn't fought in a while. I assume he's gotten way better, and he was already better than where we see the best guys at now. So I assume he's progressed a lot. You were talking about a guy at every level like Demetrius Johnson. Stipe is that guy. Stipe is able to do things you can't understand. He's able to read you in ways. He's able to force you into things. You think you're still playing this old school heavyweight fighting thing, and he's playing a different game. So, and he'll probably be even beyond that. And then Francis Ngannou kind of has like this. It's a strange thing for me.
Same with me.
It's a strange thing about feel and sense, fighting sense, because some guys are able to develop it in similar ways that Stipe would develop it as an athlete, and they develop it as just a martial artist or a fighter. You know, he's aware of where he is and where you are. I just can't, unless he knocks him out in the first round or two, I don't see him beating Stipe Miocic. He's still getting better, but I also wonder, you know, do 19-year-old basketball players come in these days that, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe someone can help me, that are way better than the 31-year-old super athlete? Are there 19-year-olds that can beat those guys in other sports? Newer guys who came up through the newer concepts? I think the answer is yes. Yeah, at least the anecdotal bit I watch hockey, because I'm a Canadian, it's on, right? And some guy who's 21 scores 40 goals, you know? How did he do that? How was he able to get so good from 14 to 21 when the other guy's been training from 14 to 38 years old? That's Alistair Overeem versus Francis Ngannou. In theory, the theory of deliberate practice and building skill on top of a base of skill and building talent on high-level talents, how is somebody this young able to do it? And they can do it sometimes. And I need to find out that answer. I need to know why. And I don't just need somebody to say, well, it's because they're younger. Well, it's because they're stronger. Or, you know, their coach has the answers already. I know they learn faster. You get to what took you 10 years, you get there in 1 year now. But still, it's an incredible thing to see. And if Ngannou's able to do that to Overeem, I'll be a fucking believer from that moment on.
I will tell you, it's some muddy waters because you look at Alistair Overeem, Fabrizio Verdum, Cain Velasquez, Josh Barnett, Ben Rothwell.
These are old guys.
Older guys.
Yeah.
So when I think about the next number of years, they're going to be gone soon.
Yep.
So is there room, is there somebody in the UFC's heavyweight division or outside of that can, you know, we remember growing up, the best athlete in the world was the heavyweight champion of the world. Yeah. Now, I know that's changed because that was boxing back in the day. But now the heavyweight champion should be, the heavyweight champion of free fighting should be the baddest dude on the planet.
Best fighter in the world.
That's right. And it feels,
toughest fighter
exactly,
in the world.
toughest fighter in the world, which means somebody should be ready to knock on that door to claim that.
So I think there are some other young guys. My favorite, when I watched his fights, and when I watched training footage, is Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades, my favorite of the lot. Now, he lost to Francis Ngannou. He had a cut, if you recall.
Yeah.
That's the only fight he's lost. No cut, go into the next round, get his back, whole different deal. We're talking about him. That's how fucking close it is. One loss due to doctor stoppage cut, and this is different. So they're 1 and 2. And they'll fight again at some point. I've seen footage of Curtis Blades training with Dwayne Ludwig. Now we got just like Stipe. Now we have heavyweights changing their game. Instead of, well, you're big, why don't we just get you moving forward? Try to move your head if you can. After you throw an overhand right, throw a left hook. See if you can duck under and fade out to your left. Now it's like dance in, slip under, 2 of these, step out, slide it to the side. I'm watching Dwayne train this 250-pounder who Instagram, follow Curtis Blades on Instagram, basically just barbecuing. For real. I haven't checked out in the last while, but I fucking enjoy watching this guy train fighting, and nobody barbecues like him. He just fucking puts meat on, at least for again, I haven't watched him in a while, but the last 3 or 4 weeks in a row, every single day it was just barbecuing meat. This is my kind of dude. And suplexing dudes fucking way up in the air at heavyweight, right?
Derrick Lewis, do you think this, I know he says he was going to leave the sport, came back to the sport, and again, if you watched any of the embedded stuff, he's trying to convince his coach to let him go to McDonald's the week before the fight. He'll cut off the fried parts of the chicken, and he'll just eat that. And of course, he doesn't make it to his fight with Fabrizio Verdum. It just does not seem like this is a guy that clearly he has to train in order.
He's just Roy Nelson.
He's just Roy Nelson.
He's another Roy Nelson. He's a heavier hitter even because he cuts to 265. And when you hear people talk about, why it's been since we left the old job, for me, I've been able to travel to a lot of these shows. And you need to be immersed in the real conversation, not the ones where we step around with the mic and we ask them, this guy ate tiramisu, what do you think? Or this guy said this about you on Twitter, where you hang out and you just hear a Matt Serra chatting with a Ray Longo and a Weidman, and you have dinner with these guys, and you don't fucking interview them. You learn for the purpose of understanding and sharing. When those people that are in it talk about Derrick Lewis, the biggest thing that they talk about as it relates to their heavyweights is if you can find the size of a guy who'll be able to cut 30 pounds to 265, it changes how they can fight and how they fight. And so that was big for him. He's by all accounts, a hard worker and very smart. When he was on you, he would not drive off the ground. He would literally lift his limbs. Instead of being on 4 points, he'd just kind of remove him so he could be so heavy. Weight. He understood his size, and then he got really good at a couple other things. One of them was, these punches land on you, and then this one, as you must cover up, goes to control your head or to an underhook. And it was actually something I saw a ton in China in Sanda competition. People would use punches and camouflage the punch to slide it under here. Awesome. They would use a body punch to get to a body lock. And Derrick Lewis became fucking master of that. So he simplified his game. Big, strong, tough, learned how to cut weight, and would use power to close distance to a body lock and then get a trip. And if you look at it doesn't always label KO or TKO, especially on Wikipedia, but like 11 of them, or 80% plus was him on top of you smashing you. It's fucking brilliant. And he's a very smart, very big, tough athlete. But once you can figure that out, and what's his name? Rhonda's guy. Travis. And I don't mean any disrespect. I literally have a problem with names. Some people have picked this up. Kicked the shit out of his body. Mm-hmm. I think he was worried he had a poop, as he put it. And he survived that. It was the right plan. Other guys, I'll see that now. Other guys have seen it. His last fight, I think there was a lot of attacks to the body. But he'll still find a way to get you. So he's going to be in there. But can he evolve? I mean, it's hard to say. I'm talking myself into really liking him more and more because there's an agility too. Not like Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt's agility is fucking off the charts, but he's a great fighter. But I want there are some younger guys, including Blades and Francis, that I think have a higher upside.
The light heavyweight division again once again thrown on its ass. John Jones fucking shit up. Probably won't be back for like 4 years, they're saying, right? Something insane like that. Both of his tests have positive, right? So John Jones in big shit. And you know what? I know a lot of people, the reality is Daniel Cormier gets to be the light heavyweight champion of the world because John Jones is a fucking idiot and continues to do the things that we all expect John Jones to do. But Daniel Cormier still is the light heavyweight champion, and there's lots of cool fights. I think the one fight that certainly makes the most sense for him and for fans is the rematch with Gustafsson. It was a very, very close fight. They fought their ass off. The fans got a great show. Everybody believes that, not everybody, but there's a lot of fans, a lot of Swedish fans, I'm sure, that believed that that Gustafsson beat John Jones when they fought. So there's a good story.
People like Volkan.
They do. They do. Certainly. Yeah. But isn't it, don't you think, give him a couple more?
Yeah. But if I'm him, I'm like, no, let's do it now.
I want that guy.
It's an interesting one for me now because I think somewhere over the line, I end up with being, I wonder what they want. Mm-hmm. And what is
but from a fan standpoint,
want, do you think? Like, what do you think he wants? Like Gustafsson makes sense. He'd like to fight him again.
If you're Cormier, it's like I've already become the champion. I have this belt. I've got a gig on Fox.
I'd retire.
But he clearly loves to fight. Combat and competition, that's in him.
Yeah. He loves to fight. He doesn't love to make weight. And he loves to train.
Then fuck it, I'm going to heavyweight.
Yeah,
if that's the case, take that belt.
If I'm actually, I think I was just like, wonder what he wants, because I really do wonder what he wants. And if I'm him, I want to fight Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight title and then retire.
If I'm him, and based on what I know, especially if you listen to the broadcast of this past weekend, DC is a huge professional wrestling fan.
Yes.
And a fight, again, if John Jones isn't going to fight Brock Lesnar, I'll fight fucking Brock Lesnar.
That's a really good idea.
But the idea, apparently, the WWE, it's going to be difficult to get Brock back into the UFC. So, but if you're DC, what are you doing it for? If you have the money, you've made the money that you've made in pay-per-views and on the Fox desk, and so on and so forth, what are the biggest, most interesting, toughest, most challenging fights if you're Daniel Cormier?
I don't know what would get me jazzed up if I was Daniel Cormier right now. I don't. I mean, I fought all those guys. This young Volkan guy, everybody seems excited about. We could fight him, but are you going to be super jazzed up, training at your hardest, pushing yourself at your best at 40 for that?
For
I don't
Volkan
know.
Oezdemir, who nobody knows.
Yeah.
Tough
dude, young.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, but you're the star.
Unpredictable, yeah.
You're the star. Nobody knows. Oh, yeah, I that's the guy that
Didn't
knocked out the
knock out a
Canadian
couple
guy.
of guys? Yeah. I don't know. And so then you start going, well, what do we want?
Yeah.
Well, we want to see John Jones back.
Yeah,
but then we don't want to see John Jones back because we feel offended. You know, we, the audience, feel offended. So, I don't know. 205 pounds is one that's actually not... I'm not
it's
super...
Weird. Yeah.
There's nothing happening there that's got me all that jazzed up. I'd like to see Misha fight Glover in Winnipeg. I think that's happening in Winnipeg. I think that'll be really good for Misha. I think it's him returning from having a tough outing is going to be really good for him. I think he's still young and he's still a stud, and I think it's going to be good for him. And I think that's a really hard fight, but I think he's got a lot of ways to win it. But there's not a lot of shit at 205 pounds. I love watching Gustafsson fight.
Yeah.
Anthony Johnson just decided, and if you don't want to fight, fucking get out, man. Yeah. It's a dangerous
isn't
game.
Rumble teasing coming back to heavyweight is what the word is. It's like, one thing that I've learned, covering the sport of mixed martial arts for more than a decade, is that there's certain fighters that get into the game because, I was a wrestler at Oklahoma State. I could either try out for the Olympics or become a assistant wrestling coach, or I can try to make a shitload of money in this free fighting stuff. Let's try that. But there are some people that it's like they're in this because they love doling out a shit kicking and they love taking the abuse as well.
Trying to not take it or like defend themselves or handle the stress of it. Yeah, it's true.
And I feel that Rumble just might be one of these guys. It's frustrating and disappointing because you've really... all your training went perfectly or as perfectly as you can. You listened to your coaches, you executed, and fuck, I slipped in a banana peel again.
I shot the bed, maybe. It's possible. I mean, it's so hard to say. Like, people that know them, we get to know them a little bit, we see some of the choices that they make. But for some, as strange as it seems, and it's one of these ones that it sounds like you're putting someone down when you say it. But some of these guys, even guys that became champions, don't have that thing in them where they just want to fucking fight. And I know that sounds crazy when you say that about some greats, and they are great. And I think it makes them even more great because they overcome that something in them where the desire, the choice to not fight, they override it. But I think AJ is one of those guys, and I think Vitor is one of those guys. And there are some of these guys who literally have to override that natural human reaction to just say, you know what, guys, why don't we just calm down here? Why don't we all just go get a drink and fucking, you guys want to smoke a joint? Let's just fucking chill this out. We don't need this violence. So that's in some of them.
Yeah,
and yet, even despite that natural tendency, they go, and you know who else has that in him? George St-Pierre has that in him. And he is capable of overriding it, as AJ was in 99 out of 100 of his fights, or 29 out of 30 of his fights, and as Vitor was in the first 7 minutes of any fight. George is capable of doing it for 25 minutes over and over again. And we'll see him do it against a guy who understands that about him.
And it's great. That's a good segue because we were talking about the light heavyweight division, and right now we're just trying to see what will happen at light heavyweight and heavyweight, but a clearer picture at heavyweight. But 185 pounds, GSP could shake everything up because, over the last, say, year, we were looking at Rockhold and Weidman, and we were looking at Jacare, and we were looking at Yoel Romero, and we were looking at Gegard Mousasi, and those were
the five.
The top five, top six.
Mousasi's out.
Mousasi's gone.
Romero is lost.
Romero's
and
lost.
Jacare lost his last fight, I believe, or he hasn't been winning enough to be in there.
And
Rockhold lost.
And then Rockhold just won against Dave Branch. And when you look at the blueprint to beat Luke Rockhold, it felt like Dave Branch had the blueprint. He went straight after that guy. Did not give Luke Rockhold any chance to breathe. People just, I think they underestimate how skillful Luke Rockhold is. Because we see how beautiful his stand-up is. It's nice and clean and smooth and athletic. And when he wins by knockout, it's super fun to watch. But when this motherfucker gets you to the ground, you're going to drown there.
Remember what he did to Tim Boach?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Man.
Machida. Now, he told us on the phone, we said, Machida on the outside and Machida on the ground. He goes, listen, you can take these guys down, but I'm going to put Machida on the ground by knocking him down.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit him, and I'm going to knock him down. Then he's stunned, and I approach it the way that I want, and I'll finish him. Motherfucker did exactly that. He said it to us on the phone 4 days earlier when we were over at in the old podcast booth. And it's wild. But, realistically, Mike versus George is a lot of fun. I'm going down in New York for it. I'm doing some other stuff at TSN for it in the coming weeks. It's a cool fight. It's two interesting people. We don't know where they're at, so there's a lot of real curiosity. I'm really curious. But when it comes to the conversation of how it affects everything, George is either doing one fight or two. Mike is either doing one fight or one in England, and then he's gone. And then you got a kid from Australia who is also wearing a belt, who is injured. And then underneath that, you got Weidman and Rockhold and Jacare and Yoel Romero again. So oddly, but these are the problems that the promoter, fuck it. As long as there's somebody else that we know that's got some conflict or is coming off a flashy win or something, they like having 6 people that are involved in a story at the top.
Of course. So what if George St-Pierre becomes the middleweight champion of the world? Do you believe, you've spent time with him, does he say, awesome, I'm the fucking man, 2 belts, bitches? There you go. There's the 185-pound title. I call out Conor, and the stuff I'm reading online, apparently he's not interested in that, which is weird, but or does he just take some interesting, cool fights?
I think, so when asked that, he was like, well, smart answer, because he's a smart guy.
We'll see.
No, he said, I signed a contract saying that I will fight Robert Whittaker next. And people are like, oh, he's got to fight Robert Whittaker next. We know what a contract is, right? You and I agree to something. We go, we agree? We're good? Okay, we agree. And then if we change our mind, we can go, hey, you want to change your mind? Cool. Yeah. Okay, great. It's literally a piece of paper that is of very little relevance if we both choose to change it. So if all of a sudden Conor's like, fuck you, George, I'll fight you at 170. Dana's like, George, let's fucking break this contract. And George, we'll give you $20 million. George is like, okay, we will break it. I don't know. I'm the worst accent in the world.
So, that makes sense.
It's meaningless. This is going to sound a little ultra modern and a little Eddie Bravo, but nothing means anything. Doesn't mean anything what the promoter says.
The world is flat.
Doesn't mean anything what either guy says. Doesn't mean anything what the contract says. None of it means anything. Doesn't mean anything what we say, although earlier we said if we can undermine somebody enough that it actually has a negative effect on them to not do it or an incredibly positive effect on them to do it, they'll often choose to do it. But they get to. You cannot compel anyone to fight anyone. It's like, dude, if you don't fight Frankie Edgar, will strip you of your title. Cool, strip me. I don't give a fuck.
And that's where we're at. I think that the Conor has taken some of the power back for the fighters. A lot of these fighters now have the control because they see, holy shit, the UFC, who's owned by Endeavor now, it's now been changed to, instead of WME, the new parent company is apparently called Endeavor, that these guys need stars. They need people to sell fights. They need athletes that people know so that their pay-per-view numbers are big so they can recoup some of the $4 billion. So how much of an influence does the UFC have when it comes to George St-Pierre? Do they believe that George and Robert Whittaker, if GSP wins this championship, that will be a bigger fight and will, close that gap of the money spent? Or do they say, fuck it, we need George to fight at 70?
So they can need whatever they want, but he'll still do what he wants.
Yeah, sure.
And now we're into a conversation about business, but it's still war.
Yeah. It's
still strategy. It's still, I'll make you worry about defending the takedown and I'll punch you in the face. I'll make you think that this is happening. It's still art of war. It's strategically exactly the same. And it's about influence and control. So if DJ is controlling Ray Borg so much so that he can do whatever he wants to him, that's the same thing as if Conor McGregor is controlling a scenario so much. It's all the same thing. You can learn all of that from studying martial arts. And in the end, I have a very good friend, Chris, who is a showrunner for TV shows. And we were chatting about this, and he goes, all the time I just get a message from, one of the top producers who says, you have to use this kid, Steve Randine, in your show. And he's like, who the fuck is he? Can he act? He said, he's got 4 million Twitter followers, or 4 million Instagram followers. You're using him. It's like, but can he act?
It's
irrelevant. His purpose is to influence. Once you're McGregor, you get more from a Conor McGregor Instagram post than you get from $250,000 of television advertising. Yeah. You get more from it. And so the job of the corporation is to make you and us buy the pay-per-view. I bought the pay-per-view.
Yep.
Mark was over. We had friends over.
I know.
Did you buy the pay-per-view?
Which pay-per-view?
The 216.
I did not.
Did you watch it?
I watched it. Yeah, I watched it.
Ah.
I watched it the next day, so I didn't buy the pay-per-view.
But their job is to get us to do that. And people will complain about money all the time and complain about pay, and I get it. But we live in a meritocracy. If Conor McGregor, or if Tony gets there, or Habib is there. Interestingly, both Holly Holm and Cyborg have massive influence.
Yeah.
If you look up massive. If you look up the amount of followers that Holly Holm has and the amount of response there is to things that she does, it's more than 99 out of 100 fighters, men, women, everyone. And Cyborg's become up into that realm as well.
I'm not surprised. And I said years ago, the UFC is missing the cyborg boat. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
This girl fought outside of the UFC in Invicta. The UFC was just, and they were paying her.
Well, this is also the other thing. And later they were like, Dana himself said, hey, we weren't always the best to her. We didn't always treat her right. There are filters. There are choices. There are human beings. They decide, if you are going to ref in the UFC, or if you are going to get one of your teams in NASCAR, or if you're Cyborg, if they're going to take you or not. There are human beings that make that decision. And you can't always influence human beings to see it your way, and they have their own agenda. But once you gain enough influence, they'll fucking do it.
Yeah.
Once you gain enough influence, they'll do it for that reason, which is a better way to get it anyways, because by then, Cyborg goes, actually, I won't take
terms.
8 and 8.
Yeah.
I'll take 800 or 80 and 80. I also want this, and this. And they go, okay, you're right. Because, and the lesson for all of us outside of fighting is you do control your own destiny if you fucking prove it anyways. It's great to be given a chance. It's better to just fucking take it until they can't ignore you. That's what Cyborg did. Yeah. And that's why she has so much power and influence. Fucking right's good for her. And even when, there was drug test failures, not making weight, any of those things, the criticism, and I would criticize her because of the weight. It's because truthfully, I know that you can make that weight. And her husband will be like, Robin's such a jerk. I don't know why, he doesn't understand how big she is. Yes, I do. Get smaller. Eat less. Don't eat 7 meals a day. Eat 6. Don't eat 3,800 calories to maintain that size. Eat 2,400 calories. You will get smaller, right? But you know what I respect like crazy? We don't want to. So we will deny that, and we will build our audience to the point that they will shout you down. And they've done that. Yeah, right. And I respect that. That's fucking, it's powerful.
It is powerful.
It's powerful. They did that. The truth is she could make that weight. The truth is, but she didn't want to. She wanted to fight at fucking 45. She wanted to fight at 145 pounds. You know what she ended up doing? She's the 145-pound champion.
Good for her.
Fucking rights, good for her. Fucking rights. Because there was no 145-pound thing. And she kept saying, Ronda, come up and fight me. I want to fight bigger. I don't want to make one. I can't make 135. Not true. She wanted to do it her way. And she stuck with it until they had to give it to her way. And that's a powerful lesson for all of us.
170 pounds, George St-Pierre, the former welterweight champion, moving up to fight Michael Bisping. I think without Michael Bisping, because who knows how many years he's got left in mixed martial arts, and George St-Pierre, still that division is sensational, especially Calvin Gastelum. Going up to 185 pounds. Is that where he is now? 185? He went.
Yeah.
He got booted up and he's
Chris
going down.
Just beat him, and then he's fighting Anderson.
Yeah, that's right.
He's fighting Anderson
Silva. So 185 pounds, super healthy. Who just beat Hector Lombard? Oh, Anthony Smith. Yeah. That was pretty shocking.
That was pretty shocking.
That he did that. But right now, 185 pounds, that's good, whether George St-Pierre or Michael Bisping's in that division or not. 170 pounds, Tyron Woodley still ruling the division with an iron fist. Is there anything interesting that you would like to see?
At 170?
Is there a cool fight, you think? Or is it just Tyron Woodley's good?
Jorge versus Stephen Thompson?
Jorge versus Stephen Thompson. Oh, and also the return of the former champion, former WEC and UFC champion Carlos Condit taking on Neil Magny. It's Carlos Condit. I mean, like,
that's fucking amazing.
Well, Neil Magny to me he does not shy away from anybody.
Oh,
right?
He's awesome.
He is awesome.
Yeah. Easy going too. Which is why he'll take all these fights. Fuck. Fights are hard. I guess they're all hard. I'll fight that guy.
Is that a true statement? Are all fights hard? If I go and just, let's say Darren Till, for example, is a fight with Darren Till going to be as hard as a fight with Carlos Condit?
No. Especially because fucking Cowboy fights with Carlos Condit all the time, which makes the Darren Till fight that much easier. Cobb came back and fought another at 45 after Frankie, or shortly after that. He came back and fought a
Holloway.
No, before that he fought a Nova Unao 145 pounder was pretty good. Another Brazilian guy that fought. And then he fought
Johnny Eduardo. No.
He fought
Hakron Diaz.
Yes, fought Hakron Diaz, and then he fought our guy, our Japanese crusher. Japanese crusher. And now he's fighting T-City, and he wants those big fights. And he is able to look at it and go, yeah, I'm not going to underestimate the fucking crusher.
Yeah.
Or this Brazilian jiu-jitsu killer. But he knows factually they're easier than the Aldo fight that he wants, and they're easier than the Holloway fight that he wants. And they're, you know what I mean? He knows factually. That's exactly, those guys have such a real awareness. We were talking about this with Cowboy earlier. He just knows this Darren Till fight is an easier fight. Do not underestimate him. Do not sleep on him. Be aware, understand, like we talked about earlier. You're not going to win every minute of a fight. That's okay too. But he knows factually this is an easier fight. And that's a really nice place to be. It's a hard place to be on the other side when this guy is treating you like you are beneath him in the way he expresses his confidence. It's tough. But you got to do it somewhere. And Neil Magny is very equipped to do it. Very, very psychologically equipped to do. Darren Till will have to be too, because you can win these fights. You absolutely, like, I'm sure Cowboy will be a minus 600 or a minus 500, which means you have to bet $500 to win 100. But Darren Till can beat him, and he knows it, which is why he will fight so smart and why he should make the odds makers correct and why he should have a great night. But same thing, Condit has been a while. It's been a while, and his last time it was Damian Maia. It didn't go so well.
I know. And Carlos Condit is another one of these guys. He was fighting before there was money to be made in fighting.
He and Cub Swanson, I trained with them a whole day. An entire day. Cub was there half the day. Carlos was there from fucking 8 o'clock in the morning. He's a little kid. He's like a little kid. He's awesome. And it was my friend Erwan Lacour. If you check out MoveNat, it's a natural movement that, training. And Carlos was there all day. And at one point they get together and Cub starts telling me about his first fight. He was 17 and he had fake ID and he went to Tijuana and fought in a nightclub. And then Carlos was like, I was 16 and I fought in the chicken coop. They were comparing notes. And that's what the fuck these guys did. This wasn't like you go down to some gym where you train with this elite coach and that elite coach and they run scrimmages and
smokers
and you've got a dietitian and shit. You fucking go get in the chicken coop with some guy from Mexico who's already fought 12 adults.
Yeah. So based on that, and
chicken
I know
coop.
The one thing, the intangible is that can add miles. That can add damage to your body. It's the fucking wild, wild west.
Sorry, I said chicken coop. It sounds better, but it was like a chicken fighting pit.
Yeah, right. Either fucking way. Yeah. Unsanctioned fist fight is what it was. Yeah. But when you look at that, though, to me, that's just an intangible that Carlos Condit has in his back pocket that if the going gets tough, I pull it my tough ass bad motherfucker card.
Yeah, Jorge Masvidal, same deal.
Thing.
There will be some guys. Bobby Green still has some of this. That was a brilliant fight.
Brilliant
fight. Brilliant on both guys' parts.
Brilliant.
But that taking away that point, it was unintentional. It was his thigh hit him, but it's part of the game.
He's got to pay
attention.
attention.
And they get it. And you notice Groovy Lando. He's been in 4 UFC fights, 4 bonuses.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, that's how he lives. It's how he exists.
But you can walk away from mixed martial arts not as good as you started.
True. Yeah, it's true. But Jorge fought in backyards. There will be guys. Bobby Green had his share of fights. John Moraga fought on the street as part of his upbringing. So there'll be some of that, but not like this. Not where you fucking jump on a bus to Tijuana. What the fuck's wrong with you guys? Like, what is wrong with you? But it's also why we love you, right? It's also why we fucking admire them. Of my favorite fighters in the world, Cub Swanson, Jorge Masvidal, and Carlos Condit. Aside from
the same fighter.
Aside from Jorge, where I knew that, I didn't know until they were telling me that's what their first fights were. We did know we called some of Carlos's fights when he was 18 and 19 years old in Japan. There's something wrong with him. Yeah. He's still a weirdo. A weirder probably now.
I agree. What do you make of Johnny Hendricks making the move, deciding to go to Greg Jackson's?
I admire that. Yeah, it's good. It's. I'll be moving over to rooting for Johnny Hendricks,
changing things up, especially he's champion. He's got money and he's gained weight, and it's like I'm the man. Now he's changing things, getting out of his comfort zone, moving across country to get some new training.
Johnny, please. Forgive me for calling you fat and lazy and stuff in the past, because this is a good move. I'll be cheering for him when he fights his next fight.
And right now, the welterweight division is kind of wide open. We see Tyron Woodley standing at the top of the division, but the fans don't seem to pull for him. We recognize, especially if you're a fan of true martial arts, that Tyron Woodley knows. I gotta hold this belt. If I lose this belt, I will never get another fucking shot, because they should have talked about the UFC. They should have talked about Dana White. Yeah. So I don't give a fuck how boring it's gonna be. I'm keeping this title. Yeah.
I think the way he fights is it has been a part of it. His last 3 fights were fights that people didn't really get. But I think it's also like, if he was running back in the NFL, or was a point guard in the NBA, or played in the NHL, the way that he interacts, kind of straight, not non-controversial. Even his controversy is just kind of like, well, I don't get treated right. That's an acceptable athlete. He's an athlete. Yeah. And people don't really jive. The athlete is not the most appreciated figure in fighting. The fighter.
Spoiled. Because when you think of athlete, these rich, whiny.
Yeah.
No, again, fighters getting punched and kicked in the head. And I understand football players get
And he tried to figure out ways to get punched and kicked in the head as little as possible in the last 25 minutes that he fought. Smart, exactly. I'm a big fan. We got to take a break and switch the card up. But in 1 second, it'll be back.
Part 2.
I think we were just cut off there for a second, but we wrapped up 170 pounds because pretty much it's wicked.
Yeah, so we know Woodley's at the top of the heap. It's time for somebody to emerge to challenge him. Super athletes kind of figured it out. Even the kind of the enigma that is Stephen Thompson. And we saw, which is kind of weird because if you think back to Thompson's fight with Rory McDonald, he schooled Rory. And then Rory beat Tyron Woodley. And it seems to be a closer version that Tyron Woodley is today. Now, I'm sure he's got a bunch of tricks, but if Rory fought...
No, Rory beat Damian Maia. Yeah, Rory beat Maia and Woodley.
And Woodley.
He beat them both.
Yeah.
And now he's in Bellator.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Anyways, what I'm saying is there somebody that you believe is a top contender to defeat this version of Tyron Woodley?
Yeah, I think dude who's fighting Damian. I think
Colby Covington
is probably I think I don't think he likes Tyron anyways. I don't think he likes anybody.
That's right. He's made some comments.
I don't think he likes anyone except Jorge.
Yeah, right. That's right. So maybe they would fight. So
he wants to, If he beats Damian Maia,
he comes out and schools Damian Maia.
And we know what's up. What you say has a big influence, and he'll say whatever the shit he needs to say. Yeah. I actually have never been more. The times where I feel a little embarrassed, and then other times I'm just like, I'm almost irate because I'm attached to this stuff in such an unnatural way. Like when people start analyzing, the words that people used, or the call out, or the walkout, or whatever. Yeah. It's like that's not a part of fighting. Like that's not a part of the fight. I get that it's part of the show.
Yeah. And the build up.
And the build up and the wrap up and the press conference. But you can't. Sorry, you can. You can do whatever you want. I was going to say, it doesn't make sense to spend all this time on that and none of it on the fight. And that is, for the most part, what about 80 to 90% of coverage is. And I find it it makes me sad sometimes. Other times it makes me mad. But like today, you try to consume it all to get as many different perspectives. I consume none of it. I try to, and lately I've been consuming almost none of it. And I'm much happier. Yeah,
that's the way to be. We've got to talk about the two divisions. Certainly, in my opinion, maybe the best division in the history of mixed martial arts. When you look at 155 pounds, the man at the top of the ladder is the guy that everybody... My wife's like, don't even say his name. I'm not allowed to say Conor McGregor's name in my house because she goes, I don't even have to be with you.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, somebody is saying this guy's fucking name and how awesome he is. And she's like,
how much they hate him.
No, she, for the most part, anywhere she goes, it's guys giving this dude a verbal blowjob, saying that he is just the man, he's the second coming, they can't wait, did you hear what he said, did you see him on the yacht, this and that.
I didn't see him on the
yacht. I know. But it's interesting because he's so good, and then you look at the other challengers, Tony Ferguson with a brilliant performance, taking out Kevin Lee. We don't know what's happening with Khabib. Whole bunch of other fighters emerging at 155 pounds. It seems to be, when we walk out into the world, most people are 155 pounds.
Yeah, right.
170 to 155 pounds.
And if you're out of shape, you're 190, but you'd be really 175, and then you'd make 155.
Cut down to 155 pounds. So it means that there's the biggest talent pool.
Yeah.
When you think of 155 pounds... And is Conor coming back? Isn't he coming back? Is he going to fight boxing? Is he going to, take on Malignaggi? Is he say, fuck you, UFC? What do you expect to happen with 155 pounds?
Again, we talked about a lot earlier, is that what they say, you have a hard time, you shouldn't become too attached to.
Yeah. Because right now people are saying, well, Ferguson and Conor.
Yeah. I think that, my guess, it's either that or Khabib or Nate.
That or Khabib or Nate.
Yeah.
Or something out of left field.
Or some other thing we haven't thought about yet. And why would it be all of those things? He's got to fight the guy with the interim belt. He doesn't have to do shit. Most
And if
people
I
don't
was
even
him-
know what an interim belt is.
Yeah, and-
The average, if there's 3 million people that will buy a Conor McGregor fight, and let's say 400,000 bought the Tony fight, that leaves, and it's probably 300, that's 10%. That leaves 90% of that audience doesn't even know what that is. They just watch Conor McGregor. And that's who, and you are, what's that company called now that owns the...
Oh, it's Endeavor.
It is?
That's-
I didn't even know that, but I don't read anything in it
that's-
now, right?
that's-
So, and I don't care.
Yeah, who
I mean,
cares?
who cares?
Who cares?
Like some nameless, faceless company owns some other thing. Ultimately, what matters is influence. And if 90% of the people who would buy it based on you, you have all the influence.
Yeah.
And it's like, but there's an interim belt. Nah, never seemed to bother anybody.
the real
before.
belt.
Yeah. Or, yeah, but Habib called this guy, I don't care what they called out. Those 90% of people never heard of that. He can do whatever he wants. But I suspect, what do you do at this point? You had this crazy fight that seemed impossible, that was impossible, that was only, and can't be made, because the only way you fight Floyd Mayweather is work your way up in boxing, win 30 fights, go undefeated, then all of these things must happen.
He leapfrogged all
And
of
it's
them.
like, no,
I don't
that
have
must
to do
happen
that.
for everyone else on earth, not me. Not me.
Wow, that's fucking...
That's
weird.
Yeah. There is one way
Wow, that's weird.
ever to fight Floyd Mayweather for the world title. And it is this complex steps of things that take 20 years. Oh, wait, now there's 2 ways. That or beat Conor McGregor. And when motherfuckers say, oh, the disruption, that is the definition of disruption. There is a way that it must be done. But now we're like, no, it isn't. I will disrupt that whole system. I'll do it the fucking way. In Silicon Valley, the home of where disruptive technologies take place, when they're sitting around their lunch breaks at Google and fucking whichever of these companies, they sit around and go, man, you want to talk about disruption? You believe that motherfucker just somehow disrupted an entire boxing industry that has existed for hundreds of years and got a fight against the number one guy in the world for $80 million? How the fuck did he do it? Oh, disruption. You know what I mean? That's not possible. And he did that. So if he can do that, the impossible never had been done, wasn't possible, no way it could be done. Everybody said it couldn't be done. The experts all said it couldn't be done. You talk to anyone in boxing, no, this will never happen. Happened. Mm-hmm. Now you're going to tell that guy, you got to fight this guy. He has the interim belt. That's not going to happen. Yeah. But I suspect he'll do it.
You think so?
I do. Because I suspect at some point, what is it about now? You fought the most famous guy in the world, and you're both the most famous. You have fucking 7 million Instagram followers. You have a yacht. Yeah. You made 80 million. You have a 2-division thing. Well, now what's it about?
So
prove something.
So you believe that based on what you know of Conor, you've talked to him, you've talked to his coaches, they want challenges, and I know that as well.
Yeah.
So do they say, okay, when it comes to Khabib, when it comes to Ferguson, when it comes to Nate Diaz, let's just say those are the top 3.
I think they are.
Okay.
And I'll tell you. Of those 3, Ferguson's probably the third, the least
interesting.
Interesting. Because
Khabib's undefeated. They haven't seen him lose.
The idea of fighting in Russia is of massive appeal to him.
Yeah.
And it's a massive appeal. And people will be like, the latest thing today is people are like, I've watched everything this guy said. They haven't watched everything he said. There's cameras on people fucking 24 hours a day. They've watched 2% of it. I've never seen him mention Tony Ferguson's name. Well, that's great. You can say that means he's afraid of him. But I thought he was already afraid of Habib.
Yeah.
Or Khabib. I thought he is never going to fight a wrestler. I thought Khabib will murder him. If he chose either one over the other, he is disproving one thing that says, not that it matters, because he doesn't give a fuck what the sheep think. Not the slightest fuck. And that irritates a lot of us. And it irritates us for a good reason. It's like he should care what we say. He doesn't give a fuck at all. But it's also, it's painful because we care what people think of us. That guy called me a loser. One loser, and I say that fairly honestly, I think he was a 3-20 in fighting, or 3-28. He started hitting me up on Facebook and go, bro, I called you out. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. You are like, I don't even know you. You're calling me out in a non-existent organization. I don't think that way. And he said, stop fighting cans. I'm like, you're a can. And then I looked, and he had fought somebody who was 0-6, and I'm like, you fought this guy who's 0-6. And he's like, he called me out. Okay, I get it. Your entire world is dictated by who says what things. And for many of us, it's that. That guy at work called, I mean, there are wars, there are gang wars started because somebody disrespected somebody. Because there's beef. There are fights in prison where 80 people fight another 40 people because someone disrespected someone. Fucking Donald Trump and that guy over in North Korea, they're disrespecting each other. But fucking some of us can, over time, develop the ability to actually see that as noise.
Exactly.
As nothing. It's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It's the words of somebody who said something for some purpose that benefits them. And that's how Conor McGregor sees it.
Speculation
He doesn't give a fuck.
True.
At all. So he would like to fight because to him, a third fight to prove something against somebody he highly respects who beat him, super appealing, get super rich.
Yeah.
Fighting a guy in a stadium in Russia,
also
that's
appealing.
Never super appealing. New adventures, and you know, he sees
Just
his
a different
life.
challenge,
yeah, and
too.
he sees his life as a movie and as this thing he writes, whether it's a fucking Rocky movie. And then third, yeah, okay, go and prove that this belt means something, even though it doesn't mean that much. These belts don't really mean much.
Because he could say to Ferguson, I actually have an interim belt. It doesn't mean that much.
And I'm saying this with a factual view from, decades of watching, as we've watched this all change. They don't really mean much. There's 2 of every one of them now.
Yeah.
So literally they mean half as much as they ever did. And I'm saying that as somebody, if you look at yesterday's video, Tony's one of my favorite fighters. I think he's a genius.
Yeah,
I fucking would love to see him fight Conor McGregor. But Conor McGregor, who has all the leverage and all the influence, is only going to fight him if he feels like it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what we say. But I think he will fight him because I think Khabib is not kicking around. I don't think there's any stadiums in Russia that are happening overnight because of the complexity of doing that. And I think Nate is like, fuck it, bro, give me $20 million or I don't feel like it. And so I think it will be.
Sure. I know right now we're just looking at those 3. And yes, those are, to me, and I think most people that cover the sport of mixed martial arts, when you talk about 155 pounds, those are the most realistic options. However, that can change in a fucking heartbeat if Max Holloway decides that he slaughters Frankie Edgar, the former lightweight champion, and he's like, Conor, I'll fight you in a fucking stadium in Hawaii.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then what that becomes is you look at that then, and you say, right now, Conor can, as of Aldo and Alvarez say and believe it and know it to be true in his skin, I'm the best in the fucking world. I can beat any man. Tony, you look at it and you go, fuck, this guy's starting to become pretty much fucking best in the world level. Maybe I want to go see. Am I better than him? Fuck it, let's go see. But if Max Holloway takes out Frankie, as he's took out 11 or 12 others, and he's the only guy, he took Conor up until Diaz, he took Conor into places he'd never been.
And he was how old, like 21?
Exactly.
Something like
you
that?
start to look at it and go, I want to know if I am better than him. Once you get into that territory, you know who can think like that? People with $100 million. People who have nothing else to achieve in the world. You can start literally saying to yourself, I want to know if I really am the best ever. Because this fucking kid, the way it's changing, the way these guys are coming up, Tony and Max Holloway and Khabib, I want to know if I can beat them. Once you get there, we'll see all those fights and then he'll retire. And I think he's getting there. There's nothing else. The fuck else do you need to do? You got $100 million or $80 million. It's not about money. It's not about records. It's not about belts. It's not about pay-per-view. It's probably at this point about, am I the best? Can I beat the best? I believe I can. If it's there, we'll see him pick the one that he wants to pick. He'll fight the one that he wants to fight. And it'll be fucking cool.
And we're talking about Max Holloway because I could see how, he's young. He says he's going to eventually move up to 155 pounds. But I know a lot of people always count this guy out, and I know they shouldn't, but Frankie Edgar is somebody that can come in and just fuck up everybody's plans.
Yeah.
Can he fuck up the plans of Max Holloway considering how good Max is? Sure he can.
Yeah, he can. But will
can he at this stage?
So I've studied Frankie for years. All of his fights have in slow motion, in reverse, and if you Google Robin Black breakdown, Frankie Edgar, there's 2 or 3 or 4 of them up there, some of which are 6 minutes long, looking at his history, how and why, how he pretended to do certain things, and all of that is genius. But Frankie Edgar, George St-Pierre, Ben Henderson, they come from a time where the combination of how they put these ideas together worked and then doesn't work now. Like Ben Henderson isn't no
like
longer
four decision losses.
He's no longer super dominant. If George comes out and either ekes it or looks okay or is not going great and finds a way or loses or something, Frankie starts to feel like he's in that category. He trains, it's hard to say, but they do change. They're not stuck in that. It's not fixed forever. Mm-hmm. But that type of fighter, Eddie is one of those fighters, and Eddie trains with Frankie. Yeah. You start coming from a place where what worked forever and what was dominant is suddenly like pretty good and then suddenly doesn't work seemingly. Mm-hmm. Everybody's doing something different and you don't quite get it, and the things that used to work don't work. So Frankie could become that overnight. I don't think it'll happen, but if it is going to happen, it's going to happen against Max Holloway, who's got reach and youth, and he's different.
Creative.
And he understands it different. He sees it different. Once you and I start seeing the game differently, really seeing it differently, and I see it in some old way and you see it in some modern way that sees mine as very obvious and clunky, and you're fucked. I don't know if that's where we are. I don't know, but I can't wait for that fight. That's going to be amazing.
You brought up George St-Pierre again. He's fighting Michael Bisping November 7th in New York City, Madison Square Garden. Also on that card, the battle for the UFC's 135-pound championship. When we look at 135 pounds, certainly, especially over the last half year, it was Dominic Cruz, the champion, Cody Garbrandt, and TJ Dillashaw, the former champion. Garbrandt, he blew my mind with that masterful performance. Now he has a chance to take on his former teammate in TJ Dillashaw, who's been working with one of the geniuses of combat in Dwayne Ludwig. How do you think this fight goes down?
I actually have no idea.
No idea.
I actually really have no idea. I've been trying to take the Demetrius Johnson approach and sort of trying to run simulations of what's going on. But they're two similar but different languages. It's like Spanish and Italian. You know what I mean?
Right. A Latin root.
Yeah, and Spanish people understand some Italian, and Italians understand some Spanish. So who can make this a Spanish fight or an Italian fight? And I don't know the answer to that. I think the answer to that comes down for Garbrandt. It comes down to swagger and confidence and self-belief, and for TJ, I think it comes down to being a better athlete. But in the end, I mean, are we speaking in Spanish? Are we speaking in Italian? They're similar, and this goes all the way back to when TJ was fighting Dominic. I was talking with Chael Sonnen on his podcast, and he's like, well, TJ is sort of a new interpretation of the same thing. It's like, I don't believe that at all. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of these three are all that similar. I think they move a lot. I think they leave the lines a lot. I think they change direction a lot. But I think they approach it very differently. Dominic Cruz makes you misunderstand what he's doing. He makes something not mean anything until it means something. And
all improvisational.
And by feel. He sees you react a certain way. He's starting to read your reaction. Oh, you're coming in. Or you start to ignore it, and then he fucks you up. Mm-hmm. And then
set patterns.
Yeah, TJ's running plays on you, math plays.
Move, set up here,
you
set
think,
up here,
and you think you see it. Then you start to connect the dots, and they're
slight variation.
Intentionally designed to make you think you got something. And then the kid is seeming to just play.
Do you when you think about that fight for the bantamweight championship, does it look more like TJ Dominic Cruz? How it was close?
That's a really.
Or does it look more like Cody Garbrandt and Dominic Cruz?
I think TJ wins, a closer fight, and if Garbrandt wins a fight, he starts blowing our minds again. I don't see Garbrandt edging it out. I see him either, holy fuck, he's the next thing, this is real, he did it again, or he starts to fade as it goes later, because I don't think he's as smart. And I think it's 5 rounds. Is
Five
this?
rounds?
Yeah,
Five
of
round
course, it's a
championship fight,
title fight. I think he has to finish him in the first 3 rounds, or I think TJ will win the fight.
Wow.
And I think that based on smarts and learning and adaptation during the fight. But I could be wrong. I'm also implying or biasing my thinking because Cody is hot-headed and he doesn't seem super analytical and he seems very responsive and not, you know, he feels like, yeah, fuck you. You know?
Yeah.
That's his personality. Can you change that in a fight? You can, but as you get fatigued and as we're being asked to push will out of yourself, you start to go to your personality and your identity, and I think that's who he is. So, but again, I'm drawing on bits and pieces that we've seen, the math and the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and do, re, mi's out of it. None of us are equipped to really do that. Anybody who does, they might be right.
Yeah. They might be right.
They might be right.
That's it.
Also, you can quite easily go and take footage of either of them from before and say they tend to do this, or he likes to do this.
And they may.
They may not. Because TJ, you know, I watch not a lot, but I'm trying to go and consume what TJ is doing with Dwayne when I can. He goes times where he doesn't show it. But he's programming him differently. Most of these cases, if you are sure you understand that fighter, but really you only understand that fighter in 2015, you're absolutely fucked. That goes back to what George believes, is he believes that when Michael says, when Michael says, I know what George is, he's a jab and a low kick and I got him, that Michael really believes that, Michael's fucked because George isn't that. And so the way we look at these, it's fun and it's fun to do, and it's a nice exercise to go in and look at old TJ, and I've done it plenty, and pattern out what he does and how people reacted before. But you understanding that now, and your opponent understanding that now, none of the reactions will be the same. So it's what it does over time is it makes you appreciate the likely variance even more. You know what I mean?
I totally know. Demetrius Johnson just looking spectacular against Ray Borg. I think probably the most interesting challenge would potentially be a rematch with Henry Cejudo after how good he looked against Wilson Hayes. But who knows?
But a rematch, actually, or not a rematch. There's Pettis versus Cejudo.
Yeah, Pettis versus Cejudo. The winner.
And then the winner of that.
Yeah.
Will.
So Cejudo.
But he just burned his. I just read he burnt his.
Yeah,
he's still going to fight.
He said he's fighting. He jumped out of his house.
And he lost his gold medals. So I wonder if the IOC will get him medals back.
I would
suspect. You expect so?
Yeah, or you can. I'm sure you can acquire them. So,
but do you believe that at this stage that isn't it too soon for Sergio Pettis to fight? No,
I mean, if you know you can come back in 5 years, get up there, taste it. Let's do it. Cejudo, I think, honestly, and I loved how he looked. I just fucking loved watching him fight that fight.
He looked great.
But there's a Darren Till element to that.
Sure.
He took an area which this guy is very weak at, and then trained himself around playing that.
Yep.
Outside from you can't touch me at all to I can just touch you to you can't touch me at all. That was the entire fight that he fought in that last fight. Like Darren Till fights that, revolves his game around that. And just because you can do that against Wilson Hayes doesn't mean you can do that against Sergio Pettis by any stretch of the imagination.
And his opinion, I'm sure, would be, well, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. I had a specific opponent that we did that because we knew we could do that.
Yeah.
Now we have to change things up for Sergio Pettis. And that means stifle that and suffocate him up against the cage or on the ground.
And if we can stay out there long enough and Pettis goes in far enough, we'll get his body and then we'll get him to the ground. Pettis, like his brother, that guard is dead stuff we were talking about, Tony, that many believed.
No,
Pettis has never believed that.
Never,
fucking Anthony Pettis, I think, became the 155-pound champion by armbarring Ben Henderson.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was guillotine choked Gil.
Yeah, Gil. Armbarring Ben Henderson, who had either been submitted once or zero in his whole lifetime.
I don't think it was ever.
Yeah. There may have been one when he was very young. But then we also saw him lose a fight where he fought from guard the whole fight and then lost.
Clay Guida.
Exactly. So if you don't get it,
that's the way it works.
But that takes us back to Tony. But we've been here for 2 hours, and if you've been hanging in with us for 2 hours,
thanks so much.
We appreciate it massively.
We're just going to wrap things up with the girls. Amanda Nunes looking dominant. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she has her fight coming up in New York City with Rose Namajunas. And Cyborg, we don't know what's going on with...
Holly Holm's going to fight her.
Well, when is that supposed to happen?
End of the year. End of the year. I suspect they'll get that done.
That'll
I think part of it is they both have a lot of influence. And so they will be fairly demanding. Their teams will be fairly demanding. It's a meritocracy. Whatever, you get paid 25 and 25. Well, since that time, I've quadrupled my consumption, my audience, how well I can sell your show. I want triple. And that is happening. That negotiation is happening.
Is that the biggest women's fight you think right now?
I think so. I think Jędrzejczyk, any of her fights are pretty exciting. And I think personally, I think Shevchenko is still a legit. I think at 125 she should be able to win that title. I don't know. I'm surprised. I mean, even that last fight was quite close. She's a pretty special fighter, combat sportswoman. But yeah, I mean, those three champions, and her, if she's the 25er, she's the number one 25er, and then Holly Holm against Cyborg. That's a brilliant fight. That's the only person I think that can beat Cyborg, and there's no guarantees, but I think she's the only one.
Right, I was thinking that Shevchenko was going down to 115 pounds to fight.
She wants to be the 25er.
25er. And as the UFC decided, that's what they're going to do.
I don't.
Yeah. An ultimate fighter for 125 pounders, and when they introduce the belt, they're guessing that Joanna will just move right down and challenge for it in the super fight. Right?
Yeah. Jędrzejczyk versus Shevchenko or whatever at 25. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, that's it for us. We ran through all the divisions in the UFC. I know we didn't give Rory McDonald and Douglas Lima some love, but I know we're excited about that fight. What a hell of a knockout. Did you see Lorenz Larkin and Paul Daly? Tremendous fight. Maybe next time we'll talk about what's going on with Bellator. Michael Chandler, maybe he'll get another shot at the 155-pound championship. But that has been it for us, or that is it for us. Mark keeping it real, making things happen. He's Robin Black. I'm the Rammer. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time on Championship Rounds.